All right, I'm calling this meeting of the North Kansas City Planning Commission to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda for February 2nd, 2023. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed. All right, the agenda is approved. The next item is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of October 13th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There are no opposed. The approval of the minutes passes. The next item is comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public tonight?
That was me.
All right, it doesn't seem that we have any comments from the public this evening. The next item is commissioner and staff introductions.
Yeah, we just thought that since this is the first meeting of the year, we've got some new faces. Might be nice to introduce everyone. I'm Megan. I'm the development specialist.
I'm Shu Wood. I'm the community development planner here in North Kansas City.
I am Lindsay McGrone. I am acting commission chair of this committee for the time being.
I'm Drew Steele. I'm a planning commissioner as well.
Sarah Shekels, Planning Commission, Ward 3 resident.
Hi, I'm John Talbot, and I am a planning commissioner as of just a few minutes ago. So there you go.
Welcome. Brian DeLong, Mayor.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today, and thank you for making up the quorum to hear all these cases today. And welcome, Commissioner Talbot.
All right, the next item is nomination and appointment of Planning Commission Chair and Secretary. Are there any nominations for Chair of the Planning Commission?
I would like to nominate Lindsay.
I would second the nomination.
All right, what are our?
Are you willing to accept?
I am willing to accept.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just say, I'm willing to accept that.
All right, I am willing to accept.
I guess ask if there's any others.
And then, are there any other nominations? Okay, well, how do we finalize
Then
that?
I'd say we could just do a yes/no vote on you.
Yeah,
as
we
the
can do a
nominee.
vote on it.
All right, all in favor of Lindsay McGrone being the chair of the Planning Commission, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, that is passed. Are there any nominations for Secretary of the Planning Commission?
I can nominate myself.
What does the
Second.
secretary do?
The duties of the Secretary include presiding at meetings in the absence of the chair and signing the minutes of the commission.
Oh man, that
Exactly.
question was prepared for on there already. That was good. That was not scripted. I did not know that was.
Trying to test us.
Yeah.
Pulled that out of my head.
Well, I couldn't fully remember it out of the top of my head, but I knew that was. Yeah. Thank you.
I second. I also Drew's nomination. All in favor? Wait, do you accept? I guess you do.
I accept the nomination, yes.
Yes. All in favor of Drew Steele being the Secretary of the Planning Commission, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nope. Welcome to the Secretary position, Drew.
Thank you.
All right. Number 7, discussion of a text amendment regarding recreational marijuana.
We have a short presentation on this particular item, and then we do not have any request for your motion today. It will just be a discussion. If you wish to ask any question, feel free to ask. And then after the discussion, we'll talk about the next step on this particular item. So right in front of you is a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared to kind of go through the recreational marijuana, what does the Missouri Amendment 3 mean to the city, and what is our prepared next step to react to this recent amendment, which was approved by the state voters. If you do remember, in November last year. So Amendment 3 is particularly about recreational marijuana. We do allow medical marijuana, and that code has been amended a couple years ago regarding to the use and cultivation of medical marijuana. So today in front of you that you're considering for the municipal code is Title 17, which is our zoning code. And this is what you will be considering for the amendment. However, other than Title 17, we also have Title 8 and Title 9 addressing the health and safety, marijuana cultivation, and public peace, smoking bans in the other chapters of the municipal code. However, those are not within your consideration. Those code amendments will be subject to approval by City Council and consideration by them as well. However, I do know you might have questions that does not get addressed in Title 17. So if you wish to ask those questions, feel free to bring it up today. However, we will discuss recreational marijuana in other chapters in our upcoming council meeting on Tuesday, February the 7th. I highly recommend you to watch or participate in that council meeting so you can have a full understanding of the cultivation, the transportation, retail, and the enforcement of the possession of medical and recreational marijuana. So today we're only talking about Title 17. More specifically, it's 17.12.040 F, which is medical marijuana. That's our existing code. It is within our special use standards under our current zoning code. The code particularly is drafted to address medical marijuana business. In other words, we're not talking about home cultivation and a personal use at this particular matter. We're only talking about the business, including retail and transportation. And so over here, there is a highlighted language over here. I want to make sure everybody is aware that no building shall be constructed, altered, or used for a medical marijuana facility without complying with the following regulations. So these are the regulations we currently have for medical marijuana. The reason I want to go through all of them is because staff's recommendation is simply, it's very easy, actually it's very simple, is to remove medical from this marijuana ordinance. So therefore, we can have a comprehensive marijuana ordinance for our zoning code, which covers both medical and recreational. So the first requirement is the buffer requirement. So no medical marijuana business shall be located within 300 feet of an existing elementary or secondary school, licensed child care center, or church. Measurements will be made in straight line without regarding to intervening structures from the nearest point to the exterior building wall of the school, child care center, or church, or the nearest point on the property line containing the medical marijuana business. Our recommendation will just be remove medical, this particular term, from that requirement. Therefore, we cover both. And then the second requirement is outdoor operations or storage is prohibited. So all operations and all storage of materials, products, or equipment shall be within a fully enclosed building. No outdoor operations or storage shall be permitted. And that stands for both medical and recreational marijuana. So we will not make any changes for this particular requirement. The third item is on-site usage prohibited. So no marijuana will be smoked, ingested, or otherwise consumed on the premises of a medical marijuana business. In this case, we'll just remove medical from this particular requirement. In other words, in a retail business where marijuana will be sold, you still cannot consume it on site, and which is in consistency with our smoking ban in a lot of ways.
Was that a result of just our smoking ban, or is that regulated by the state in statute?
So,
Or does Amendment 3 impact that in any way?
Amendment 3 doesn't really impact
They
that.
don't touch any part. Okay.
Yes, we will amend our current smoking ban in a way that we will just remove the tobacco, that particular term, from the smoking ban. So then smoking is not very restricted to
Yeah.
just tobacco product. It will cover everything, and that is really from a public health perspective and from a practical perspective. How when law enforcement is getting involved, how are they going to address it? But there will be details being discussed in our Tuesday council meeting on
Okay.
February 7th.
Thank you. And I must apologize there. Out of habit, I just blurted out. I should have been recognized
you-
by the chair. That was,
This is
it's
a
hard to
great
break the
question.
habit. Sorry.
You're fine.
I
This is a great question. And trust me, once when we pass this ordinance, we do need to keep in mind is can we enforce it? Is this practical? So when you do have all these questions, you're helping us to draft an ordinance, to shape in a way that's, that can stand for tests. And then, so the next one I want to continue, and feel free to bring up your questions if you have any. The next item is the hours of operation. So we limit the hours of operation of marijuana business from 10 p.m. To be exempt from, we regulate our hours of business from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. In other words, we don't want overnight marijuana business happening on site. It just increased the danger and increased the enforcing issues over there. We're going to keep this requirement in our code and expand it to the comprehensive marijuana business, meaning for both recreation and medical. And then the next item is the display of license is required. So this will be required by the state anyway. So we're just going to keep the language and take off the word medical. The following item, I don't remember, I can't count which item this one is now, but I highlighted, it's particularly addressing residential dwelling units. So residential dwelling unit is prohibited to conduct any marijuana business. However, home cultivation and personal use, that's not a business. When we're talking about business, there is a commercial component into it. You're trading, you're selling, you're storing, and those are business. And residential dwelling units are just prohibited from conducting any of those business. And then the next item is a ventilation requirement. This is just from a building code and a fire code perspective. Make sure the ventilation meets the code requirement so there is no issue with fire, smoke, odor, and related issues to your adjacent properties. And the last item is the review process. So site plan review is required for all the marijuana businesses at this point. The reason we're regulating that through a site plan review process is because this gives staff an opportunity to review the ventilation requirement and the place of the products for all the businesses, including retail, transportation, and on-site volume. So this way the city is aware of where these products are. We can keep a close eye for our code compliance officers. So simply saying all these requirements will still stay in place like they do for medical marijuana. We're just expanding that requirement to cover the comprehensive marijuana. And this is in line with the Missouri's Amendment 3 and how they're processing their license. So currently the marijuana business license holders, they can apply to convert their medical marijuana license to a comprehensive license, meaning they can produce both medical and recreation products. So we're just reacting to that particular matter. With that said, are there any questions?
Yeah, can you go back to the previous slide, please?
This one?
Yes, thank you. So I have a question about the first point. In Chapter 4, Title 4, Chapter 4 of alcoholic beverages, under all retail licenses, we're regulating the operating hours between 1:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. on weekdays, and in between the hours of 1:30 a.m. Sunday and 6 a.m. on Monday. I was curious why we are diverging from that time frame with our retail marijuana, and if there just kind of the justification for that.
I believe this is a justification for that, and we just regulated marijuana different from the consumption of alcohol and beverage at this perspective. However, I was not involved in that
Okay.
in this particular code amendment, so I couldn't tell you exactly why they did it this way. I would assume this is a consideration after tremendous amount of research and definition of what marijuana, how the marijuana is being sold, transported, and they decided that this is probably the best time frame for operation hours at this point. If you wish to change the hours, I would say you can make that recommendation, and then we can bring it forward to City Council for further discussion. So today you will, after the discussion, as I mentioned, this topic will be brought to City Council's work session on the following Tuesday, and after that, staff will draft an ordinance for code amendment, and then you will review the code amendment for Chapter 17 and make recommendations to City Council, and City Council make final decision on those.
Okay.
So if you wish to line those hours up for a particular reason, staff can look into that.
Okay. Did you also have something? No. Oh, okay.
I don't believe so. Not specifically recalling, but I think there's just a lot of uncertainty around everything. And at some point, we were just getting rules in, have rules in, because we needed rules in place.
Sure enough.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's some aspect to that, because we knew wanted some regulation, but I don't think there's any specific concern that I recall that made it 10.
Right.
And I
So-
don't find it unreasonable to adjust that.
Just keep in mind, Chapter 17 mainly dealing with medical marijuana business, not
Yeah.
not the consuming part of it.
Correct.
The consumption is, and the possession of it is dealt by law enforcement.
Correct.
And it will be in different chapter to regulate those.
That's 20. You can consume 24/7.
I would be, is there a procedure that we need to follow if we would like to get make a recommendation to align the hours for this with alcohol consumption or alcohol sales
Mm-hmm.
in businesses?
Yes, I will take it as an input from you guys today, and I will bring it forward to City Council, let them know. We have already brought this discussion to Planning Commission for our zoning code, Chapter 17, and they wish to see amending the operation hours along with the alcohol, to line up with alcohol and beverage consumption. And we'll get some input from City Council. And meanwhile, I'll do some research, try to figure out why we limited from 8 to 10 at this point. And we'll bring
Yeah.
back to you when the drafted code amendment is ready.
Makes sense. I just think if we're using the land use regulations to, limit the business operation hours, we've got a whole title section that's tailored around intoxicating substances that's been developed over a long, long time. And if this is where we've landed as a community on the sale of alcoholic beverages, it seems like it's reasonable to apply those regulations in land use form to retail marijuana businesses as well. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you. Are you aware of us regulating any other, and I should probably know the answer, but I don't, regulating any other businesses that are involved in any sort of sales, whether it be pharmacies, I know alcohol joints are, but there's no other retail limitation
will need
related to time.
You will need to obtain a license from the state first.
Yeah,
And then, so.
but
that
no,
part-
there's no similar like 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. restriction on like CVS or pharmacies or anything, right?
Right.
Okay,
Not as I'm aware.
so I'm not sure why we did this. But through process, we can always correct things
think it's
and
reasonable.
improve them.
Sorry.
Yeah, go please.
I think it's reasonable to have the regulation there, but I think we have a good regulation around the retail sale of alcohol, and once you start adjusting that time frame for the different business or even just the land use type, then I'm failing to see a really robust justification for that has a positive outcome.
I agree, and I don't think we've had any problems. I don't have the police chief here to ask, but I haven't heard
Oh, was it
any significant problems with the business operation down there either.
I was about to say that's.
But we have
probably-
one that I know of. Sorry, I'm picking on the one, but
Yeah. That's probably a
Yeah.
more appropriate question for our police chief.
yeah.
We're probably going to take a look at how many business licenses we have for retail of those. But keep in mind, not everybody who sells alcohol will be eligible to sell marijuana products.
No, yeah, no,
And in fact,
absolutely.
they actually probably can.
No, absolutely.
Way.
Yeah. The parallel I'm seeing is just between the
Yeah.
two different things. I'm not saying they belong in the same land use context. So,
Right.
okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
So I have a question
Mhm.
that's in the packet. It wasn't on the PowerPoint, so I don't know if this falls out of our scope like you were talking about before, under the home cultivation. I know it says here, it requires registration with the city.
That's correct.
Is that something that falls under, I'm curious about that process. Is there a fee for people to do that?
No, there's no fee for that.
Okay,
So the process for a home cultivation registration is to keep a record for the city. Therefore, we're aware how many home cultivation are there so we can track on them and make sure the ventilation is being monitored and it's designed to the building code requirement. And also, on the other hand, keep in mind, the home cultivation registration is a process through community development. So we're also the development enforce code, so our officer will have the record. Currently, I don't think we have received significant amount of home cultivation, but even for home cultivation, they have to obtain the required certificate from the state to be able to do home cultivation.
right. So I'm just curious why we are adding an extra step there for that. Is that just to make sure that, like here it lists they must have like a working restroom, kitchen, that those
Right.
things are met?
Yes.
And those are stipulations we've put in place, not the state?
We do have a list of regulations for home cultivation per our code, and I believe it's under Chapter 860, under the
Okay.
marijuana cultivation. Again, it is not in your discussion today, but I would
That's
like
what I
to
was
just bring it up to everybody's attention, and so this is for education purpose for me and for everybody too. Community development is responsible to review home cultivation. The reason for the registration point is, like you said, Commissioner, it's exactly to make sure it complies with the regulation. So the city has a second pair of eyes on it, so we can track those and enforce those a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, we'll move on to the next item. That is discussion of a text amendment regarding short-term residential dwelling unit rental.
All right.
All right, what do we got?
So this item in front of you has already gone through the City Council's work session. What we're doing here, as some of you might know, North Kansas City currently does not have any regulation on short-term rental. The way we define short-term rental typically is a rental property that conducts a consecutive less than consecutive 30 days of a rental unit within or attached to a particular property. So the issue we have right now is our code does not address anything, did not mention anything about short-term rental, did not even define it. However, we do have a section of the code mentioning that any particular use not mentioned by the code is treated as a prohibited use. In other words, if people were asking me, is short-term rental allowed by the city today? The answer is no. The only way to allow it is to amend the existing code to allow this particular use. However, do we have short-term rental use in our community? The answer is yes. We do not have a significant amount of them. And I don't want to show you and identify particular properties for short-term rental, but everybody can go up to the platform and search, and you will know, yes, North Kansas City has short-term rental. The reason that you are hearing it today is because we want to get some initial feedback from you. What do you foresee? How do you want to regulate short-term rental? We're taking the input as we're drafting this particular ordinance from scratch. We have been in discussion with, in this region with a lot of municipalities, including Parkview, who has recently passed an ordinance on short-term rental and start enforcing it. They have also passed a tax on the tourism tax to tax the short-term rental. In Kansas City, we've been in discussion with them as well. We learned a lot of lessons from them. There's such a big city with a lot of issues on short-term rental, especially the enforcement part. So those are great lessons that we learned. And what we would like you to know is staff has been working on this particular piece. And the initial input we got from City Council and a few citizens is that we do want to allow short-term rental, but with regulations. So today, we're going to go through some tests with you on short-term rental to have a better understanding on how you want to regulate them. These are the slides I prepared, but we don't have to go through all of them. So I have a list of questions for you. The first question is numbers of total short-term rental. STR stands for short-term rental here. Do you want to set a cap for the short-term rentals, say a total number of them that the city would allow per year? Then that's up to your guys' discussion. We have gathered some feedback from City Council that they do not want to set a cap for the total number of STRs we would allow for short-term rental. The reason for that, part of it is particularly from enforcement standpoint, it is not very enforceable for community development. Say, if we said the amount as, I'm just making the numbers up, there is no number being indicated before. I'm just saying that, just for example. If we set it as 50 per year annually, and I have customer A and B showed up at the same time trying to fight for the last spot, how are we going to grant them the approval or disapproval on it? And how are we going to, cut off the deadline? And when we revoke somebody's license or they stopped running short-term rental without notifying the city, how are we going to track all of that? And again, at this particular point, we do not have a significant amount of short-term rental that makes staff concerned. So I would recommend you guys consider not to limit the total number of short-term rental, but I'm open to hear your guys' thoughts.
I was just going to say, if we decide to not put a cap on it at this point, that is amendable.
Right.
Later on, if we feel we need to do that.
Right.
Okay.
And keep in mind, zoning code is not a Bible. It can, and it should often be amended to adapt itself to the current use, the current trend, and make it more enforceable and make more sense to everybody and help the city grow and in a very, strategic format. All right. So then question.
Did you?
Oh, sorry.
I got one more, sorry.
Sorry, George.
It doesn't seem to me like a nominal cap makes a whole lot of sense. The issue isn't necessarily the number of short-term rentals, it's the proportion of short-term rentals to the whole total housing stock. So when that proportion gets to the point where it's pushing residents out, that's where we start getting an issue in the community. And so to the extent that we do pursue any sort of cap, it would make sense for that to be more of a ratio than just a flat number. That obviously has implications in terms of determining what the right ratio is and calculating that ratio. Is it dwelling units or housing units, households, population ratio? But just a
Right.
cap of 50 or 10 or whatever doesn't make a whole lot of sense on its own.
I get it.
Okay.
And to keep in mind, there are other regulations you can put in place that will impact the total number of short-term rental you would allow for the community. For example, if you only allow, like what we have currently for our accessory dwelling unit, if you would want to only allow it for owner-occupied property, then you automatically disqualified all the renter-occupied properties at this point, which will bring it up in another question here. Just keep in mind they're all somewhat correlated. So the second question over here is about, do you want to regulate the numbers of SDR units per property? Say, per property here meaning, one lot or one big building. Say, this particular lot has a duplex. Do you want to regulate, want to set a cap, say, one per property or 1 unit per lot or something like that? Do you want to regulate that?
I'd like to make a comment about that. I personally am not in favor of short-term rentals, although I do understand the appeal and how they can help bring people to our area. However, I do feel that they should be restricted to single-family units. There is a short-term rental in one of the Northgate Village townhouses. That particular unit has been operating as a short-term rental since 2018. The unit directly next door to it, so the one that it shares a wall with, has sold twice in the last 2 years. I don't know if that's related to the fact that it is attached to that short-term rental or not, but it brings up a red flag that if you are having to share a wall with a rotating series of people, that is more, that could be an issue over having a freestanding home that isn't butting up against, more people who could be affected by the kind of transient nature of the people who would be in those short-term rentals.
Okay. Any other discussion for this?
Would that fall under apartments as well? I don't know if that's, I don't even know if we have any, if that would.
In the apartments?
Like,
Do we have
would,
any
would
short-term
that essentially, would that fall under the same thing, not just townhouses or duplexes, but apartment buildings as well?
Yes,
Okay.
they will be covered as well.
Okay.
Right, I had it.
Go ahead.
So, no, I find it interesting. I don't think we're going to, have quick answers to anything that restricts or caps the number of units, but I will say, I do live in a townhome in Northgate Village, and the property next to, with the shared wall with me was a short-term rental property for about 1.5 years. And, I think, what I would say is that they're probably, or they can lead to where you feel like you're a little bit unsafe, like you don't. If it goes on and on and on, at the time, I knew they're unrestricted, they're unregulated in North Kansas City, right? So if you have a complaint, there's nowhere to go, right? So I would suggest that rather than cap maybe the units, because, for example, one time there was a large party there. And although I understand it was like a pre-wedding party, I mean, it was a little out of hand. So I think what we could think about also is restricting how they're used and how much parking maybe they take up or what a person can do with it, right? Restrict. So that if we make that restrictive, there's not people just coming in to buy a property to use as a short-term rental unit because it may be too restrictive or something that they might see as something that can't be rented quickly.
We do have other mechanisms
Right.
following up questions, exactly like what you said, that you can restrict the particular.
Certain aspects of it.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so if we're ready to move on to the next one, this is yeah.
I
go
say
ahead.
cities have regulated a lot of different ways, including like requiring a certain amount of lighting, and there's a lot of different things you could do. But to the last one though, it's number of total units per property. So the question is, like, if you could take a row home right now, I could rent that out as, I don't know how many bedrooms there are, 3. I could take that out right now and rent that as 3 Airbnbs. Like, what would be my max number right now? Okay, assuming we pass everything else, could I rent that out as eight Airbnbs, 10 Airbnbs?
So that will depend.
Isn't that kind of the question here?
That is a question here.
Should it be limited by like number of bedrooms? Should it be limited in some sort of way on each individual property? I mean, I do think there is
Right.
something to definitely more consider there, because I don't think you'd want a townhome over there that has 10 Airbnbs in it.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, that's where I think you start to get into problems with some of these properties, is when they start getting subdivided
Right.
to a way that becomes unmanageable as well.
Well, that is a real concern of the people that live in the townhomes. Because it seems like they could be easily converted to a short-term rental property. The way that, I mean, the design is very nice, but frankly, yeah. Somebody could still, like, live in the top half and have a short-term rental unit in the lower half, for example. So, yeah, I mean, there's a real concern, I guess, in the townhome area about short-term rentals. So.
And I would imagine that some of the duplex and multifamily residents would have the same concerns. Essentially sharing walls with an unknown entity that resets once a week, potentially. I mean, yeah, there's the noise and the not knowing who's there and all, but I mean, you brought up the safety issue too. And if, I live in one of those, I live in a townhouse as well, and if there was just a rotating, revolving door of strangers going into the place that is directly against my bedroom wall, I personally wouldn't want that. Now, is that what the city and other residents want? Then, that's a different story, but I really think it's something that we need to consider, given the number of multifamily units that we have in our area.
So we currently regulate accessory dwelling unit in a similar format as you guys mentioned. We only allow accessory dwelling unit for owner-occupied, detached structured places, like single-family houses, like you mentioned. So we could look into that and propose a similar language for short-term rental. However, keep in mind, there is a big difference between accessory dwelling unit and short-term rental. Short-term rental is not designed to have a renter occupy a particular unit for more than consecutive 30 days. So the impact will be different. Whereas accessory dwelling unit, it's more designed for renters to rent it for a longer term. So when you guys are consider these two, I mean, they have similarity, but also I want to make sure you guys can differentiate them. Yes.
Could you refresh me on this? Where did council land on this question?
Council landed on this question on do not regulate the number of STR units. per
Unlimited number of
property.
units per
Yes.
property.
That's correct.
That's what I thought. I remember it's fairly unfettered, I'd say, on most questions, but I couldn't remember exactly where that one landed.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
And if you guys are interested in the council's input in that particular discussion for the work session, you can retrieve the YouTube channel for the December 7th City Council work session. We spent an hour on this topic. So there are a lot of good input in there as well.
Pretty limited on regulation at the end, though, was the,
That
General.
was that was the brief summary on it.
yeah, there's my high-low. You just got the executive summary.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, if we're ready to move on to the next question, we still have a few questions to go through. I want to make sure we get time to go through all of them. The number 3 is owner versus owner occupied. Do we want to limit STR to only owner occupied properties, or we want to just open it to either owner or non-owner occupied? Doesn't matter.
Do we know now? I know I haven't looked at the website to see. I know there's one on my street just because I know it, but do we know how many currently are owner?
We don't know exactly because the platform, say the VRBO and Airbnb platform, that when they host the short-term rental, they don't give you the exact location
Right.
until you paid for it or booked it.
Well, the
So,
address is on the front of many of the pictures.
right. You can probably use your institutional knowledge to figure out which property that is, but because of that, there is no specific way for us accurately analyzing how many of them are owner occupied versus non-owner occupied. All I can tell you is we have less than 20 STR properties listed currently. So therefore, they are not, we're not a STR booming community
Right.
that raise a big concern, not yet.
So do we think, we don't have any idea then if half of those are
We don't.
out of state owners or any, we just don't have
Honestly,
any idea?
we don't.
Okay.
And really, again, we can always draft an ordinance and then we implement it. When we implement it, typically that's why code is built to be amended. Then you wouldn't know, okay, I need to fix here, why I need to fix it, because now we hit a wall. We know we need to fix the problem. So don't think that this is like the last piece we'll be working on. We'll work on a lot of these eventually.
I will say what you run into is you start seeing a lot of them owned by LLCs that, depending on how they register it, sometimes get a little trickier to figure out who the exact owner is. You might be able to get an agent, but sometimes they're just people that are just like registration farms out there that'll register LLCs like crazy for people. So it does get hard to trace the actual owner. To that, though, and maybe it's a future slide, do we have anything considering requiring any sort of manager or property manager area contact if we have issues? Someone that we know can respond to issues within a certain amount of time. I don't know. I'm
Right.
getting laughed at by George here.
So
Is that
we
a bad question or okay? Oh, okay.
So we
I
typically
couldn't tell what the
would
laugh was.
require-
Sorry.
We typically would require registration with the city for operating, and I will touch base with you here at the end, so you will know for short-term rental, they will be required through a business license process. Then there will be a contact point. And so the contact point will make sure this contact point is a valid contact point. And then therefore, when we issue the license and the certificate, they should place the license and certificate in their short-term rental property so people know who to contact when there is an issue.
To follow up on that, though, we don't have any actual specific requirement, distance or time requirement.
No,
They could put a contact at a Tennessee, and that doesn't really,
that's correct.
help a responsiveness situation.
That's
Okay.
correct. And so if you do have that concern and you do believe the best approach to hold the property owner or the management company accountable is probably just limited to owner occupied only. So then you always have the owner, the residents on site.
I go back and forth on that quite a bit, but I definitely feel more comfortable if I know there's someone in the metro, I'll say at least, that is in charge of property management. Because often they do hire outside
Right.
cleaners, they do hire outside property managers to help do stuff. So it'd be good, I think, if the city had the name of someone that is at least regional that we know can be responsive to issues. But nothing further.
That is very hard to keep enforcing and to keep tracking those management companies and business alive. That's what I would say. Because yeah,
I think I
It's hard to hold
recognize
them
the
accountable.
challenge here where if you say that you want it to be owner occupied, then you are greatly restricting the allowable STRs.
That's
I mean,
correct.
I am willing to venture that 0 of the existing STRs in North Kansas City are owner occupied right now. I mean, if you look at the websites, you can see how often these places are being rented. I mean, unless that owner is gone most of the time, they're not occupying these places. I do think, though, that in order, one of the things that we love about North Kansas City is the neighborhood feel and the community feel. And yes, we only have 20 or so of these things right now. But if we open up a baseball stadium 5 miles down the road, we might have 100 of these or 200. And then we've got people who want to live in Northtown that can't because we've got outside LLCs located in Arizona, operating a whole block of STRs, and a whole bunch of other people who would really love to be part of this community that can't because of that. I think that it is in the best interest of the actual community of North Kansas City to require that these things be owner-occupied. I know that's not in the best interest of people who like to make money from Airbnbs. So I know that that's something that's going to have to be balanced, but I don't think that unless we can find another way to actually have a local kind of contact person available, I don't see how we can manage the number of these that could potentially end up in our city with the changes that Kansas City wants to make around us. I mean, when the KC Current Stadium opens, when we have the World Cup here, and they could potentially be doing games at the new KC Current Stadium, that's going to bring in so many people, and we could, if we don't make some kind of policy and regulations in place now, in 3 years when we have the World Cup, we might be overrun with STRs. I mean, that's just kind of a worst case scenario. But I'm trying to approach this from the residents' perspective, but I also understand that there's a business interest that has to be addressed as well, and I don't think I'm the right person to talk to that.
Sure.
I'd certainly agree. I mean, if any regulation is to be considered through any of this conversation, I mean, now is a prime time. I can go back and look several years ago, and there's 1 Airbnb, and then 3, and then, there is a multiplier, and it does appear to be growing. So, I mean, if there is a time to regulate it, is probably now rather than punting down the road.
That's correct. I agree with you.
If we were to look into implementing some kind of limit, would that be something we could do by ward? Like, so many per, like, Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4? Is that something that could it be done in that way? Or would it have to be by different metrics?
You could tie it to word. However, just keep in mind the boundaries of each ward typically will be redrawn and redistricted every 10 years when
Right.
we look at the population over again. And theoretically, I don't encourage you to do that because from the practice perspective, it's not much different from putting a total cap on the number of units or the number of STRs you want for the community, for the whole city. We will run into issues on complaint and enforcement and to figure out who's registered. And there will be people arguing they're non-conforming because they've been running SDR before. And are they grandfathered in? Are they titled in to run it at first? So they got a spot automatically. So there are a lot of issues when we're considering putting a cap on particular things. I typically don't recommend us put a cap. Those are just my comments. Yes.
Yeah, my preference is that they be owner-occupied. I mean, looking back at kind of historically, like where this whole thing started was that idea that you had this house, maybe it was too big, or like all your kids left, and you had all these rooms, and here you can make some money, right? Out of your home, right? And now it's gone, completely this other way where like people are buying like a townhome and then using that as a money-making proposition and kind of going around rental property laws, right? In my mind. So, and the point you made earlier about, I mean, it seems like we're just getting closer and closer to downtown. Like, we're cheaper. We have kind of a little entertainment district. If you're here, you really don't even have to go downtown. If you don't feel like it, you can just walk around. So You know, like you said, there could be like exponential growth. We don't know. So my preference would be owner occupied at this point. I mean,
I like that little plug, though. I agree. North Kansas City is a very awesome place. I like
Yes,
the
I
direction he was going there.
How
That's
do
why we're
we-
talking about it.
How do we define owner occupied? Is it that when there is a short-term renter on site, the owner also has to be on site, or what exactly does that definition mean?
So the owner's prime residence indicates the property that he is renting out,
Okay.
saying, you know, on your ID or on your utility bill, it shows you live here as your prime residence. Then that's a owner occupied.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that they would be there particularly when
Right.
the property is rented.
But then it wouldn't be.
But
Oh, let me follow. I was gonna. So then,
Mhm.
under what? Okay, never mind. I'm thinking and getting ready to ask a question. This is dangerous. I feel like I hear what you're saying. So it doesn't require simultaneous occupancy by both a renter and the owner to be owner occupied.
I mean, you can never track somebody down, say, where do you sleep tonight?
Where did you sleep last night?
Yeah,
Like-
so this is not a joke, but literally it is. However, most of the people, for their primary residence, this is where their utility bill will show if they have children, which school district they're going to be in, and you can hold them accountable for they are more responsible and they probably will live here. I would put it this way. But theoretically, do they sleep here? There's no way for us to track that down.
So what I'm thinking, and I'm running through a specific short-term rental platform in my head, where they rent them as like an entire house, an entire unit, or a shared situation. And so that's where I think kind of that confusion is on what's owner occupied. Is it, you know, if they're renting the house in totality to just one renter for a night, then is that owner occupied or not?
I got your question now.
See what I'm saying now?
Yes.
First, some are set up and showed that they're shared, meaning the owner, whether or not they're there that night, I don't know, but the owner is actually, you know, generally primarily living there.
That's
Which I
correct.
stayed in one of those. It is kind of odd sometimes.
So
but yeah.
owner occupied, in this case, for example, if I'm going to Colorado for a month, just having a vacation, which probably won't happen, and I want to rent my property out for 2 weeks to make some money for whatever reason, maybe my kids just broke something expensive, is that owner occupied STR? The answer is yes, because this is my primary residence. I'm just
Got
out
it.
for a little
Okay.
bit time. Yes, I rent the totality out to one renter, two renter. But however, this is an owner occupied STR. I'm coming back, and you better not let me find anything big after I came back. And so that's why when you're looking at owner occupied and non owner occupied, the big difference is when we hold somebody accountable, there is a way we hold somebody accountable. When it's a non-owner occupied, likely they are not involved in this community because this is not their primary residence. If that makes sense to you all.
A month in Colorado, how much vacation time do we start with?
I started
No, I'm just
queuing
kidding.
it up now. Maybe you can grant me a few more to make it happen.
I am a renter,
Yeah.
so I could not put my apartment on Airbnb.
That's correct.
But if I move out, my landlord decides not to sign a year lease, he would be able to put that house on Airbnb, or no, because that's not, that would not be his primary residence.
If that's not his primary residence, then yeah, he cannot.
So
All right.
they have to rest their head on that property X amount of nights? Is this
Again,
what is okay.
I don't track down people where they sleep at night.
Okay.
Is the survey still going? The online survey?
That's correct. I will show you guys where it is here in a little bit.
I'm just curious what people have said. What other residents? I'm curious what
It
you've gotten
is-
from that, or how long it's going to go, and
Right.
see where the feedback is there.
We'll
as
definitely
well.
bring the survey results to all the decision bodies and let you know what we've gathered. last time I've seen it was a couple weeks ago, maybe a week, just 1 week ago. I believe I've seen some really polarized. We have a list of questions. There's some of the questions are really polarized, so you pretty much have half and half. And some questions, you pretty much get the same answer, yes or no. And I'll go through this survey with you, and so you guys know where it is, and you can definitely tweet it out or blast it out and help us get more comments from the community. All right, let's move on to question 4. Seasonal versus year-round. I think it would be helpful if I just tell you what the council's appetite is for these questions. Do you guys agree? So you
That'd
probably
be a real quick meeting then.
you're probably wondering. I mean, you're a different body, so you have a different perspective, and that's why you're in a planning commission. But I'm sure you're curious what they said about it. So seasonal and year-round SDRs, from the council meeting, I believe people do not want to regulate SDR to limit them to seasonal only or allow year-round. They don't want to distinguish seasonal or year-round. In other words, you can run SDR as much as you want all year long if we regulate it another format. Does that make sense to you all?
I think there are better ways to regulate them than seasonal versus year-round.
And it will be easier for staff to enforce it as well. Okay, question number 5. We have on-street parking requirement. Council's feedback was, no, we don't need to regulate or require additional parking to be dedicated for SDR. And I know some of you will have different opinion. And this is one of the polarized question when we do the survey.
I think this depends on where you live. On my street, it wouldn't be a problem. There's adequate parking if you had a couple of vehicles, but I know you go 1 block west of my block and it's a totally different story. So I don't know how we would address this particularly.
So we
But-
currently do require 1 additional parking space, off-street parking space to be dedicated for an accessory dwelling unit. So it's not something super new to the community, and most of the communities do regulate parking requirement for SDR. Because especially if you're considering owner-occupied, you already have somebody on site probably, and then they're renting out, most of the time, then they're renting out a portion of their house or units, then likely they need additional parking space to limit the number of impact, the amount of impact they have posed onto their neighborhood streets. I would say it's not a rare regulation, but really probably depends on where you live. On-street parking might not be an issue. Again.
I'd agree. I'd say by zone could definitely be or by ward or a zone of city, whatever. But by zone could be one way to look at it. Another, as you said, kind of depends on the owner-occupied thing. So if you're requiring the owner to be there and maybe they're potentially on site the same night, now you have a different equation. You got a little different problem. You've got the resident there and you have additional guests above and beyond. But if someone's renting out an entire house, you'd think whatever they already have set up for their parking situation should translate.
It would be no different, especially if the owner is on premises while they are short-term
Yeah.
renting. Be really no different than having an aunt or uncle
Yes,
coming in
yeah,
and staying with you
yeah.
for a couple weeks from out of town.
That's true.
I don't, personal opinion, I don't think that there's a huge parking problem here right now. And so I don't think that in requiring an increase of parking, especially given some of the other things that council and this commission are trying to take on, makes a whole lot of sense. I don't see a congruency between those two things.
Any other comments?
I agree. I agree with you, Drew. I don't necessarily think that it's any different than just having family over, especially if we were able to do an owner-occupied situation. But even if we don't, yeah, I have different opinions about parking than some other people.
Okay. All right. Shall we move to the next question? Yep. We still have a few more, but it's getting easier now. So for the next question, really, it's a recommendation from staff, which is the approval and renewal process. So likely, we would recommend a approval process to be kept more administratively, meaning staff holds a little bit more power on approving those, reviewing against the document requirements and the regulations, and then the renewal will also be processed annually if they meet the qualifications. And then so this way, we can also process the business license with the customer, just like how we typically would run for other business license. That's just my recommendation to you to consider. Another topic along with this approve and renew process is the tax part. Should we tax short-term rental properties? And if so, how much should we place? Yeah.
I contend we already should be. I believe this is already covered by definition under hotel and motel, under Chapter 3 of the Hotel Motel Transient Tax anyways, which includes any structure, any portion of any structure that is occupied or intended or designed for occupancy by transients for dwelling, lodging, or sleeping purposes, and includes but not limited to any hotel, inn, tourist home or house, motel, studio hotel, bachelor hotel, lodging house, rooming house, or public or private club. I would say in somewhere that has to be included by definition already.
You're right.
To me, the rub is it's not legal to do it right now.
That's correct.
So how do you tax that? But I do believe once we bring it into conformance, it should already fall under what I believe was the voter passed hotel motel transient tax already at 5%.
So
And they should pay that.
Okay.
I
That
believe.
is
Personal
that,
opinion.
that is a standard operation.
Yeah.
However, I will recommend us to include this language in our drafted ordinance for STR, particularly mentioning it. They're also subject to hotel motel tax, 5%, approved by the city. And typically, the way we process it is we will have to notify all the existing SDRs. What the Airbnb and our VRBO start to do now is they no longer collect the tax for city anymore. So the city has to set up their own mechanism to collect the tax, particularly for if we wanted to collect the ones through our motel hotel tax.
So short-term rentals, we're collecting it on behalf of the,
That's correct.
or the platforms. We're collecting it on behalf of
That's
the,
correct.
the
They used
person
to.
renting, but now they no longer collect it all. So it's a
That's my
direct payment
understanding.
from the property owner
That's correct.
to the taxing jurisdictions.
That's my understanding. If you go to the website, you will see there are a couple maybe 3 municipalities or 4 that fall under the Airbnb taxation part. If you look at it, I don't believe they're accepting new municipalities' requests to collect the tax on behalf of them.
Have we called them and asked or addressed that with them? Or are we waiting till we're farther in this process? Because I will
Yes,
say,
I have.
dealing with the National League of Cities quite a bit over the years, this is a problem that obviously we are not the only community addressing or talking about this. It's been an ongoing thing for years. And at one point, they were going through their disruptive phase where we're just going to drop everything in every city and we don't care what the regulation is. It does seem like scooter companies kind of are trying to do is try to approach it from a different angle, which is trying to work with municipalities. That's why I was just curious if we've had any actual conversations yet with any of the short-term rental platforms.
I was not able to get a direct hold with anybody. However, Parkview recently passed an ordinance talking about taxation. And my plan is to, because they
See if
already
they-
made the effort, my plan is to get a hold with them, see if I can find a better contact through them and make a regional effort.
That is the next problem, is people rotated a few of these companies quite a bit.
That's true.
By the time you receive the email, they're already gone.
That's true.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I don't know how the mechanics of this might work, but if the platforms are not collecting taxes, is there some way to require, if we implement a license, like you have to get a license every year, reapply, that we would require proof of paid
That's correct. That's exactly.
taxes to have
That's
your
exactly how we will process it.
Okay.
Like we'll require a NKC business license, and when we review your license, you're correct. This is the mechanism we're going to use, and we will require a annual renewal on your business license for short-term rental. Yes, Mayor.
So if I pull up a listing right now, it does say they are paying a local sales tax in North Kansas City, which would be what our 2% is our portion of sales tax. Do we know if that's truly being remitted to the state and then remitted to us?
That is not a question I can't answer you today.
Okay,
But I can
because it
ask
it
her.
shows as one of their collected taxes is local sales tax in North Kansas City. And the reason I do think they should be hit with the 5% as well is, it's a business parity thing as well. Hotels and other lodging,
Right.
for them, it's a very clear-cut issue. They are paying it. They do have all these regulations in place that, for what is generally a similar business, at least on some fronts.
Yeah, that's a sales tax, so
Yeah.
that's a different.
Yeah, there is a difference there. Yeah, you get the 2% sales tax, and you
Right.
got the 5% hotel motel tax.
That's correct.
Oh, the tax. Your taxes are per visitor. Do it per visitor.
Shu, can I ask?
Yeah.
First I'll say, I think that the list of municipalities that you provided us and what they're doing, it looks like almost all of them are requiring inspections and registration, which I think we should also do. I think they should be required to have an NKC business license. My question is, where did City Council fall on these questions?
They have the similar thought process,
Okay.
like what you guys did. They do agree that we need to have inspection and make sure they pass all the code requirement, and therefore we can issue the business license, and then they're subject to a renewal. So they have the similar thought process.
I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Mm-hmm.
Because people have different views on what they think happens with an inspection versus what an inspection is. Could you run us over a little bit, how you view inspections?
So my department already conduct a rental property inspection. So some of you might know that we do systematic inspection as well. And that does happen occasionally. But for rental properties, when the tenant is moved in or moved out, that's the time when we will inspect the property. However, there is a maximum number of times for inspection per year. So we cap it. So we don't say if a property has people moving in and out all the time, all year long, then we don't inspect it like 30 or 100 times a year. There's no reason to do such. And so I will say for a short-term rental, we're probably going to run through the same process for inspection, just like what we do for all the other rental properties.
Okay. To further that, what does an actual inspection entail, though? What are they
So-
looking for?
The inspection, when our code compliance officer or neighborhood service officer actually go into a property to inspect, they will take a look at the particular use. They will take a look at building code, saying if this is a inhabitable area.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised, some of those units, they're not inhabitable. And then they'll take a look at your fire alarm system. They'll take a look at water, utility, and make sure, like I said, it complies with today's code or meet the minimum safety standard and requirement.
Okay. There's one that always comes up is mold, right? So mold is,
Right, mold is a health issue.
Okay.
So, however, our staff is not specialized in mold inspection.
yeah.
So if we receive a complaint in the past for a mold complaint, what we typically would do is we would refer it to the Clay County Health Department, and they will send their specialized personnel to inspect those. If
Thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, next question. All right. It's about enforcement. So like I said, currently we don't have regulations regulate STR. So theoretically, those are not permitted uses. However, we are not taking actions enforcement yet. It's because we know We're not prohibiting STR. We're just don't have the regulations in place. The point for the enforcement is that we will need to enforce it once when the code is adopted, along with our law enforcement department and our fire department. So the building code, fire code, and the our police dispatch. So everybody would be on the same page. And that's just it's not really a question. That's just something I'm informing you all how we work together. And the online survey, I think Sarah mentioned and Lindsay mentioned earlier, it's still alive. This is the link to the online survey. You can also find it under Community Development Department on our website. And it is a SurveyMonkey survey, and you can take a look at it. It's about 10 questions, I believe, and I'll show you guys what it looks like here.
Are you going to answer the questions live for us?
No, I wish. So if you get to the landing page, you'll see that this is a short-term residential dwelling unit rentals that we want to hear from you, and you start clicking begin the survey. There are 11 questions. They're all yes or no questions. We designed it in a way it's super short and easy for people to spend, let's say, less than 2 minutes, and we will gather some initial thoughts to help answering all the questions as you guys just ran through today, and then we can get a broader understanding of what the community wants, where we're heading to. This, like I mentioned, this survey is currently alive. We plan on closing it up at the end of February, so we can get a total number and feedback on this particular survey, and we'll bring it forward to the decision body. Then our next step, as I mentioned over here, will be staff will draft the SDR ordinance to incorporate it into our municipal code 17.12.040, our special use standards. Likely will be a format similar to lodging. It will be lodging SDR. We currently already have lodging bed and breakfast. So it will be a different section for SDR. Then we'll regulate the what type of building can have short-term rental, whether it has to be owner-occupied or not. Do we require additional parking? What's the registration process? What's the inspection process and taxation? And all the details will be listed on that particular draft. And once when staff has the draft ready, we will bring it forward to a workshop that we will host a workshop likely here in the city hall for a large gathering with a citizen. Hopefully we can engage enough citizens to ask questions, we can answer as many questions as we want. And then we will move forward to you to bring the drafted ordinance to you and ask for consideration. And then when you give us your feedback, we're likely to revise the language and then bring it back to you if there is any revision needs to be done. And then we will hopefully get an action from you to recommend to City Council for final approval. And when City Council approves it, we will bring it into enforcement. If that all makes sense. All right, thank you for your time. That concludes all the short-term rental today. We can move on to the next item.
Thank you very much, Sue. That was really informative. The next item is comments from staff. Are there any comments from staff tonight?
I do have a few comments. Not comments. They're more good newses. And so just so bring everybody's attention that we have applied for 2 Planning Sustainable Places grant last year, if you're not aware. I know this commission doesn't meet every month, and everybody has your own personal life and gets busy sometime. So I want to make sure we're all aware of these 2 grants and what they do, what they help in North Kansas City long-term wise. So one of them is targeted on our riverfront levee. What we're going to do is we're going to conduct a feasibility study to see how likely and how do we convert our current riverfront levee to a more recreational component for North Kansas City, including biking and walking trails. So that's very exciting. We're going to start talking about contracting with particular consulting firms maybe early summer this year. And then another Planning Sustainable Places grant is focusing on multi-county barrier removal. I know this is a really big name, but really what this study do is we cooperate with Riverside and Kansas City, Missouri, to take a look at an opportunity for a walking biking trail starting from Highway 9 in Riverside, crossing our existing children's fountain, then bring that through the Hillside Levee and hopefully connect to our North Kansas City Hospital and eventually to maybe Soto Traffic Way. So we're taking a look at that feasibility at this point, and we are working with Mid-American Regional Council on these two particular grants. So hopefully we'll get a report sometime next year, and then we can take a look at implementation, see if there's a way for us to get some federal help and then construct them eventually. Other than that, I want to thank you all for your time tonight and welcome Commissioner Talbot. Thank you for your interest and your commitment to this commission, and thank you all for your continuous commitment to these community topics, and your input is always appreciated. All right, that concludes my comments.
All right. Are there any comments from commissioners tonight?
I'll just congratulate our two new officers as well as welcome John to the committee as well. And thirdly, it looks like, per our conversation earlier, I've seen a couple articles. It looks like the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services has begun, or will begin tomorrow, approving licenses for recreational use as well. So it sounds like nearly every dispensary that already had medical probably has an application in to convert their facility. And I know they're looking at February 8th, but all these articles are saying apparently now maybe tomorrow. So we shall see. But don't hold your breath for that. Yeah, I think from my understanding, once they kick the applications in, the place themselves should be able to sell immediately once they get their application approved, I think.
So, as far as I know, the Missouri, the state has I believe I can't remember exactly how many days they have to respond. If they don't respond within a certain amount of time, then it's automatically deemed to be approved to convert.
A spokesman for DHSS says once a license is approved, a dispensary can immediately begin adult use sales as long as they comply with state guidelines and rules. It says they should begin approving that on Friday, which I'm losing track of time, but it's tomorrow. Yes. I know. Is it Tuesday, Wednesday? I don't know.
I believe we will be able to get this ordinance in place on time.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. No, just an update. I felt relevant to our topic of conversation earlier. And now I'll shut up. I know. I'll calm down now. I'll be back on Tuesday, though.
Any other comments from commissioners tonight? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Come on, Sarah, make it.
Is there a second? Second. All right, we are adjourned.
Whoa, no approvals? You're not going to ask for approval?
Oh, wait, approval, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, there are no no's, we are out of here.
Yeah, come on. You got to, scoot it out. There we go.
I'll take that.